Hi, Mike. Nice to meet you. I see that you've partnered with the QTube for Scorerelief 2022. I've entered into the competition, and how are you?
Doing very well. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was nice to get your email to kind of reach out. And, I think we were just sort of discussing before we started, we've got a couple of interesting topics to kind of chat through today.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, lots changed in the music industry. I've self-published with, CD Baby, and the music royalties are not being good for me. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, royalties are, it's sort of a hot topic. And I think I mean, I guess just to sort of put it out, one of my, personal opinions is that I think emerging composers now shouldn't, and this is, people would argue with me, but I just say don't expect royalties. Like, don't
Mm,
expect that you're going to retire on royalties in the same way that generations before us could.
mhm,
I think it's just not a reality. And as much as, I agree with all of the people that are sort of fighting with, through ASCAP and PRS and all these different collection societies to try to get the rights to come back,
mhm.
and try to get Spotify or Netflix to pay more money to artists. I just think the reality is, I don't think it's going to happen, or it won't happen in the way that we can. And there's so much that's being lost out, where kind of instead think about where you can make money elsewhere off of your music,
Mm.
and think about other ways to kind of monetize rather than expecting a royalty stream.
Yeah, it's I put my work on the royalty-free music websites as well. I've had to learn to accept that royalties aren't going to be what they used to be 30 years ago in the music business. And well, for yourself financially, how have you coped?
Well, it's I mean, I earn a bit off of, say like I've got a bunch of production tracks and things like that, different music libraries and stuff that have been good earners.
Hmm.
Um, but I just think it's not in the way that, say like Irving Berlin, wrote White Christmas,
Hmm.
and the royalty checks off of that coming in year after year are still substantial. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the difference of an entire estate or not off of one song.
Hmm.
And it's not my belief that every song, should deserve that necessarily. I think, there's a reason of one thing being super successful versus another. But I think that we'll just never see that kind of, sort of treatment or appreciation financially for music in the same way. I think it's just changing. And so, I mean, royalties for me, I've earned on, a handful of things that have come in and are consistently good earners every quarter.
Hmm.
But, the other side of it is I pitch for projects that are, have a very low music budget where you could barely record anything.
Hmm.
And the reality is it might play on TV a couple times and then end up on Disney Plus, and you're not going to see anything. So,
Hmm.
the expectation, is kind of, oh, well, composers will earn royalties. So, kind of we expect you to essentially spend the whole music budget.
Hmm.
And, then when you're in a situation like that, and we're not saying it's for everything, but I just think that's become more common where there's a project that can barely pay you to record the thing,
Hmm.
and so you're not going to earn anything on the front end, and then they take the back end away, then you're just writing music for free.
Hmm. Now, unfortunately, that's what happens when you start out independent. You're doing it all for free in the beginning until you get
I-
your big hit.
I'd say it's even, it's sort of at all scales. I mean, even on major Hollywood blockbuster, the composer might, walk away with, say, $100,000 or £100,000, but out of a total music budget of maybe 1 million, if you're only taking 10%, it's not a very, sort of good model.
Mm.
And if that, is a major release that then goes straight to Disney Plus and doesn't play in theaters. I'm just using Disney Plus as an example, but kind of for any streaming service. it's just a reality that I see. I think for kind of my generation and the ones following, I think it's tougher, and um, not to just kind of start straight out in a very I don't know, sort of somber tone. I think there's also then different opportunities. Like I think we're just at a point where the music industry is completely shifting.
Mm, mm,
So, wherever there is a big shift in an industry, there's opportunities for a new way and a new path to be made.
mhm. Yeah, exactly. It's always changing. And have you been a full-time film composer all your life?
Yeah, so I've been, I moved to London probably about 8 years ago, and I was studying at the Royal College of Music. And kind of from there is when I started to sort of plant my roots. And so film music has always been my goal.
Mhm,
Since I was in high school, I decided I wanted to be a film composer. So I always kind of got into composition through that route.
mhm.
And so, yeah, I've just been kind of exploring and kind of building up. I spent a bunch of years assisting other composers and, working with student projects, releasing my own music. And I think all those things together, have kind of put me in the place I'm at now, where I'm more independent artist. I, don't need, I'm kind of, my assisting days are behind me. And, I've learned a lot in all that time,
Mhm.
but I'm now at a more sort of stable position where I get to do the projects that I want to focus on.
Yeah, that's so cool. And what composers inspired you growing up?
Definitely, James Newton Howard is one of my absolute favorites. I really appreciate his work, and I think he's just an absolute craftsman, an absolute master.
Mm,
Of course, John Williams. I think for every film composer, it's sort of who is your biggest inspiration after John Williams.
mhm,
I think he's inspired everybody. But I really, what I think is kind of drawn me, I think, to either them, and particularly James, I think has a really unique style that's quite adaptable.
mhm,
And Alan Silvestri, the same, that people like that, they've been in the industry for such a long time, and they have this longevity because they have the ability to keep sort of moving and adapting. A score of theirs from 30 years ago will be very different than a score today.
mm.
And they're able to kind of keep learning new skills and keep learning new sounds and producing in a modern way that doesn't let them kind of get dated. So yeah, I think I really like kind of the big orchestral guys. That's always sort of drawn me to it.
Yeah, mine's is Hans Zimmer is my chosen film composer. When he wrote Time in Inception, that was a good film, and The Pirates of the Caribbean. But besides composing, do you have any other hobbies, or do you have any other interests?
Yeah, I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It's one of my kind of hobbies outside. I also do some partner acrobatics and stuff like that. I think it's really good to have something else that kind of keeps you a bit grounded.
Mhm,
And I think also, maybe 10 years ago when I was 20, um, my whole life was just film music all day, every day. And I think it's really healthy at that time, to kind of become obsessive about something and really get into it and pursue it. But I think as you go on, then, and it becomes more of your job,
mm,
and it's a little more stable, and you want to focus on kind of how you're going to keep innovating rather than learning. And so
mm.
I think you need some stuff outside of that to help kind of give you a different creative perspective. So I find those kind of movement practices really creative.
Yeah, I go hiking, and I go to the gym as my hobby. I like watching wrestling and occasionally UFC when that's on. And I was watching Disney Plus today. I was watching the Clone Wars, Star Wars, a bit of American Dad, Family Guy as well. That's what I like. I subscribe to Disney Plus.
Yeah, I'm not just putting them down. Subscription services and things like that are great.
Mhm,
I have Spotify, I use Spotify. Uh so it's more just talk about the reality of sort of where we're headed. I
mm,
think, we need to kind of see what's coming and adapt rather than, just kind of cry out against it.
mm. Do you find as a musician, I'm like this too, that do you appreciate Spotify? Because I'm to the point where it's just like, I don't appreciate it much.
I've got mixed feelings, but I think in the same way, it's you know, if you go to Starbucks and you get kind of the same cup of coffee you'll get anywhere in the world, and is what it is, and it's pretty overpriced for what it is.
Mhm,
You are just expecting it,
mhm,
and so I don't think that like Spotify is evil in any way. I think they're just a company, and they're a public company. At least as far as I know, I don't know if they're traded publicly or not, but that they're they have a board and shareholders and people that they need to please every 3 months.
mm,
And the goal of any company like that is just to keep growing. They're looking at, did we get bigger than the last quarter? And so, their way of doing that is working within whatever legislation there is. And there isn't any legislation stopping them from not paying artists, something in line with what maybe radio or TV royalties would be. So, they're just operating as a company, and they make a lot of money doing it. So I don't think it's inherently evil. I think it's kind of the wrong, because some people, call that out. I think it's more like, of course, if you run a company, you're going to try to do it in the most efficient way too.
mhm.
Um, so it's just kind of figuring out, I think the best thing about Spotify is anyone can discover so much music like never before,
Mhm.
and it will make some suggestions. And, I often discover new artists that way. But it's also just got a whole catalog of nearly every song ever written in one place.
Mm.
So it's quite amazing that you can just sort of search and find, what's this, track from the 50s, or something like that. And you don't need to kind of file through and research. You can just search for it.
Yeah, you got all these streaming services copying each other. Like Apple brought out their lossless audio. That's just a marketing thing. Tidal say they've got Tidal's charging $20 a month. You know,
Yeah, I think they're, those ideas. I mean, they haven't really competed with, Spotify or Apple Music in any
Mhm,
significant way. And I think it's because, there are audio files, but it's not the vast majority.
mhm,
And I think it's great that different options exist, but maybe that's kind of where we're headed, where if you think about cinemas, at least here in the UK and specifically in London, I've seen cinemas over the past 8 years that I've been here kind of change and evolve, where you get much less of like the big multiplexes, or the only things that show in the big multiplexes are the big blockbusters.
mhm,
And then there's also a bunch of kind of smaller indie picture houses, and then some that are sort of in between. So then there's some smaller cinemas that will serve you food and drinks and bring it to your seat, and it becomes kind of like a night out at the theater.
mm,
And so I think of it similarly to kind of horse riding,
mhm,
where riding horses was a primary form of transportation for 300 years, and then within a decade it was totally wiped out by the car.
mm,
People still ride horses, but now only in very specific kind of niche ways, and there's
mm.
very niche markets for that. So maybe that's the future, is that you're going to be able to go to the cinema and you'll be able to see something in this massive IMAX with 3D audio, and it'll be an amazing experience, and you'll pay a high ticket price to do it. But that will be sort of one specific night out, rather than, it's not the only way you can see a movie. And a
You
lot of
know,
people have really good, home cinema setups.
Mike, I went to see the new Spider-Man movie a couple of weeks ago, and I wasn't very fascinated with it. Like everything's just Marvel in the cinemas these days. No, I feel nothing's original anymore. Um, and the ticket price is like $21 just for a seat. That's a rip-off.
Well, I think, a lot of people are going to feel more and more that way, where, it's like, well, I'll just wait until it's out, and I can buy it on demand. And, so you'll get people who want to experience it. Okay, I want to go and see it in the cinema where I'll have the best sound system and, I'll have a premiere experience. And yeah, I'm willing to pay, $21 to go and get that experience for certain films. But, I think the vast majority won't, and the vast majority don't already. I mean, movies, 10 years ago used to be, movie would come out and it would be in cinemas for months. Now it might be in there for 3 weeks. And then, because it's just not profitable. So I think it is really interesting. And, I think that I agree that there isn't much original programs coming out right now either. And I actually found a lot more original ideas and stories are coming through video games instead. I think there's incredible narratives and stuff coming through games. I mean, there are original shows and films and stuff, but I think the big studios, at least, it seems like, I mean, who asked for another Scream movie? I just don't, I mean, sure, but why keep kind of rehashing things that, from 20 years ago? Leave it at what it was, or another Matrix film. I mean, I love The Matrix. It's one of my absolute favorite films of all time, the first one. But, it's kind of like, leave it at what it was.
Let's talk about sound quality. Because a lot of Spotify is all MP3 quality. It's not, not the wave audio file. And us two being musicians, we could tell what sounds better. Do you feel that vinyl's got a better sound or CD? Some people are more into vinyl.
CD for sure. I mean, vinyl, I think, is just a particular, because I released an album. So my album Between Worlds that I put out a couple years ago, I pressed it to vinyl and I went through the whole process. And really, if you're going to press anything to vinyl, you've also got to make sure that you're, kind of the point of it is recording it really high fidelity to start and keeping that process all the way through. Otherwise, I could take an MP3 and press it to vinyl and it's still going to be an MP3, but now on vinyl. It's still going to have that quality and all of the audio information that's missing in an MP3, missing from, say, a WAV file or any lossless format. Then you're not going to all of a sudden get it. The vinyl isn't going to create it. So I think with vinyl is one thing. I only make that point because I think a lot of people might feel like, oh, vinyl is warmer or vinyl is this or that. It can kind of only have the data you give it. I mean, a CD is the same, but I think CD, was a big kind of revolution in quality. Going from cassettes to CDs was really high fidelity and making it, having it be digital and having it being sort of clean and pristine was a big shift. But I think we haven't really had a major shift like that. I think it's also the way that it's consumed. So most people are just listening on their phones. And until I think, I don't know, iPhone 8 or 9 or 10 or something, it was all mono anyway, if you're just listening through the phone. So I think it was iPhone 8 was the first that had stereo speakers in it. So, if you could do a really high fidelity recording and then it'll get folded down into a mono speaker off of a smartphone. And, so I think it's kind of gotten away with it because it hasn't made a difference. It's like, great, well, if we put it all in MP3s anyway, then, you won't be able to tell the difference between this or that when it's played that way.
Let's talk about the Beatles. They had their Get Back documentary on Disney Plus. I watched the whole thing. Beatles have had how many albums are remastered over time? One of the best bands. Do you find yourself as a composer, you're always working on your sound?
Yeah, I'd say the sound and the craft, I think kind of one and the same. I'd think of my sound as, what is, or sort of like your style. Like if you heard something, does it sound like me? And I think that is, the best thing you could work on. I mean, the Beatles, they kind of did their, 10,000 hours, where before they were really famous, they were playing in Berlin and they were doing shows all day and night. And their manager was just throwing them up on stage and, we're exhausted, take this and keep going. And, so they really kind of cut their teeth and put the work in. And I think, that's the best thing you can do is focus on your craft, because different trends will come and go. After Hans did Inception, everything has sounded like Inception for 10 to 15 years. So it's like, having this big low bois and the brass and all that. And, that sort of defined the sound of trailers for the next decade. And, it's great, but then it becomes, okay, that is one, track. And before that was the Lux Eterna from Clint Mansell, the from, what's the name of that film? It's escaping me. But yeah, it was this, famous track that was kind of played on trailers over and over again. And so point is, you get these trends and, it's one thing to kind of be like, oh, I need to kind of be able to produce this sound. That can be great, but then it will fade, and I think being the best composer you can be is really the best way to sort of future-proof you, because, 15 years from now, we could all be writing, music for, like NFT experience walkthroughs in the metaverse. Who knows? There's jobs that don't exist yet that will require music. And so as long as you're a good composer, and can adapt, that's, you'll find work.
And that's what I want to do. Get paid work.
Yeah, it's, I think as you, I mean, I'm not sure kind of, the types of things that you've worked on already and sort of, I guess, where you're at in that sense. But I think it's good kind of when you're starting out to find, some people that you can kind of do their short films or something and actually work with the directors. And until you can kind of build a reel. And then once you've got a reel, I think of it like, you need to be getting something out of every experience. So whether that's money, whether that's a creative opportunity, or it could be an experience or a credit. If you're not getting any of those things, then it doesn't make sense to do the project. So when you're starting out, you're getting a lot of experience, and you might be getting some, probably not any significant credits if you're working on student films, but you'll be getting the experience for sure, and probably more creative opportunities because you get a lot of freedom in what you get to write and try out. So that's very valuable. And then as that goes up, you get onto say the big blockbusters at the top. A lot of the music is not that creative because it doesn't get to be. The studios are pretty risk averse, and so you don't really get this freedom to be able to, kind of really do something innovative. But you're getting a lot of money and you're getting big credits, and so, and the experience of sort of doing the job, can be worth it. But so I just think of it that way, that at a point you get, okay, I've got my reel, and, I've kind of been able to explore and find some cool sounds and things. And then you look at a project and go, well, I can't do this for free, and then once you start sort of asking for money and demanding, a certain thing, and actually turning stuff down, it actually sort of comes back, and you'll end up getting paid more in a way. There's a great piece of advice I was given, is that you'll lose more work by saying yes to projects than by saying no to them. You kind of gain more work by saying no to stuff and sort of establishing your rate.
Well, I won first place in the Voyager songwriting competition in 2020 in classical. I got a nice plaque. That was one of my best achievements I've done. So it's those sorts of things I put on my portfolio.
I say it's all worth it. It's all worth kind of just to build up your portfolio, your works, and get a reel and all that. And especially, I also think it's helpful kind of depend on what you're pitching for. It's another great piece of advice I was given is kind of understanding the level that you're at and what it takes to pitch to one level higher. So kind of if you're, say whatever level you're at is like where you have carte blanche, where you have the ability to take any of those projects. So like, a student film, for instance, would be lucky to have me because I've done tons of them and I have established credits. And, so for there, I could say yes or no to kind of anything like that. But, a big Netflix series or something is something that I've yet to get a credit on. So for me to reach into that, I'd be competing against people who could say yes or no to any Netflix project like that. Someone like Hans can turn down anything, that he wants. So in order to do that, you've got to kind of really pitch your ass off,
How did Hans Zimmer get so successful in the film music industry? He's like a millionaire.
Even more than that, but I mean, Hans is brilliant, and I don't know him personally. I've sort of been in the room with him on a couple projects a couple times, but we've never really formally met. But Hans, so kind of from the outside, I mean, I think he's a brilliant businessman, and he's really good at, he's got a unique and specific sound that he's been really good at kind of pushing and marketing as well. So, I mean, as far as him in interviews and things like that, I mean, he's a brilliant kind of showman in that way. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, why is Hans super successful? I think a lot of it has to do with his kind of business aptitude, and the way he's definitely someone who, walks into a room and all the attention, is focused on him. It's he has a way of kind of attracting that. He's got this energy. But so, I think then he's also been very smart in the way that kind of at the start of his career, and especially with sort of sampling an orchestra and creating killer demos and stuff, sort of leagues beyond his, kind of peers at the time. And so I think, he's definitely changed the industry in a massive way, in more than once.
Yeah, because I saw him play live in Sydney, and that was an amazing concert, probably the best concert I've been to in my life. So that's where I get sort of my inspiration. But like you were saying before about creativity, I published some of my own music videos on YouTube, and I've always wanted to write about how I feel about world events going on, express it through music and video.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, is that kind of, I guess, sort of if that's more, I encourage everyone, if you're have your own kind of creative ideas and stuff like that, just go and do them. Just go and create them, and rather than sort of waiting for the opportunity. It's hard to find that project that's going to come along, that's your sort of ideal scenario. I think most projects that I've made for myself, those have been the ones that have always pushed my career forward.
Mike, this was a great episode with you today. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm just Mike_Ladoucer. Pretty much you just search my name on any social media. My website, mikeladoucer.com. And on there, you can also find a link to my Discord. So you can find in the Discord server there, there's a bit more of a growing community kind of chatting about these types of things. And I'm putting a little more time into it to make a few more sort of show and tells and different opportunities to kind of share work and that kind of stuff. It's really great. It's a very supportive community there. And you can also find through my course. So I've got an online course in how to write music for film and TV. That's on Teachable. So you can find all of that just through my website. And kind of through that, I also do some one-to-one tuition and do a bit of individual teaching too.
Awesome.